Hello and welcome to Ordinary, a podcast that aims to help Christians live for Christ in everyday life. My name is Josh Bannister, and each week I sit down with a couple of UK pastors, Graham Nichols and Mark Whettam. It's our first week back after the summer break, and to kick off this new season of Ordinary, we're doing a Q&A episode, answering some of the questions we've received from you guys over the summer. Hello, I'm Josh Bannister.
And I'm Graham Nichols.
And I'm Mark Whettam.
Welcome back to Ordinary. We're starting a brand new season. You'll notice a few changes around the Ordinary podcast, starting with the music, which is mainly down to a new producer who's on the team now, who's taken on some of the busy work on my behalf. So we're starting with a fresh slate. This is season 4?
Season 4, but
season
Josh,
4.
I don't. You don't sound that excited.
Oh, I'm
by
excited.
It. You sound a bit. You're sounding a bit like
Mate, have you heard the new intro music? I'm trying to match the vibe.
I haven't. No, I haven't yet.
It's super chilled. You know,
I'm loving the pictures that we had to have taken.
Production values have gone through the roof. We're feeling much more lo-fi, much more.
And we're recording on video. And I just sipped a drink. Oh, and Mark just sipped a drink as well on video.
Well, this is live TV. Podcast, whatever it is.
Got to be natural.
Eh?
So it's not TV and it's not live.
If you're listening on audio and you'd prefer,
you're not live.
If you're listening on audio and you prefer to listen on YouTube, we have a YouTube channel as well, so you can see us as well as hear us.
YouTube.com/ordinary, I assume, is the channel. Isaac will correct me if that's wrong.
He will.
But yeah. So video is fresh offering from Ordinary, new music, new season, new vibes. I hope we really do hope you enjoy it. No sponsors yet, but we put some feelers out there. I've sent an email to Kellogg's and Nokia, who I think don't exist anymore.
Sponsored by the Lion of Judah.
Lion of Judah.
That's my guy.
I'll be your brand manager.
Thanks.
On the downside, you've still got the same presenters.
That's true, for the most part. We have decided, though, that we're having more guests, aren't we? We've planned in roughly one per month, which would be so 1 out of every 4 episodes will roughly have a guest on it. And when that happens, we might slim down the host, so maybe one of us will drop out so the guests can come in, just so that it works out more time-wise. Because having 4 on a 30-minute podcast can get a bit... Well, it's just a bit pointless at times, isn't it? Because there's not enough time to share around.
Yeah, it's all a bit crowded.
So that will start next week with an episode where we have 2 guests. So Graham will be solo hosting that one, and he's actually already recorded it. Was it good, Graham? Can you do us a little trailer?
It's going to be really good. It's going to be looking at the idea of sexual purity from the point of view of people who weren't Christians in their kind of teenagers or early 20s. So it's just complementing some of the stuff we did last year, and I think people will find it really helpful and interesting.
Nice one. So that's next week. But this week on the podcast, we're going to be addressing some questions that we got over email over the summer, I guess, and towards the end of last season of Ordinary. So we're going to kick off with a question.
From the 5,000 questions we got, we've selected down
the
to
top
these
5 or 4,
top 5 questions.
You lucky folks. This one comes from Ruth and is about animals in heaven. Are there animals in heaven? What happens to all the animals on the last day? Do they just disappear with the old earth? If animals are in heaven, will there be specific ones we know, or generic animals? She's written like deer and rabbits. I don't know if they're a deer and rabbits generic.
I suppose you mean species. Animals. Species,
okay,
maybe.
Yeah, that made me laugh.
Pets.
Pets. Okay. Yeah. Will animals in heaven be vegetarian? If they are there, is there no more death? And will we be veggie in heaven? So those are the questions. Quite a lot of questions there. So break it down as you wish and address each part. Maybe starting with, will there be animals in heaven? Because that'll answer a lot of the other ones, I think.
Yeah, just on the way into it, have you got any pets, Josh?
No, I don't. I grew up with dogs, so I've experienced the pet life, but I don't have pets right now. I've got a baby. That's enough.
Well, yes, yep. And I've got 2 dogs and 4 chicken.
You got 4 chickens? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I've got 4 chickens. I wouldn't really call them pets. I'd more call them like factories.
Have you not had any eggs, Josh?
I've not. That is quite exciting.
Nor me.
Okay.
No, actually, you haven't.
Yeah.
You should have.
They lay eggs daily.
A chicken lays about 5 eggs a week. So yeah.
Really, that's exciting.
Is that all?
Well, it's
That's
enough
all right.
for
He's got
us.
I guess
4 of
one a
them,
day,
mate.
isn't it?
That's 20
Yeah.
eggs a week. Well, how many
Yeah.
eggs can one man eat?
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm normally giving them away, but I've never given them to either of you two. It's because you
He's
don't live
Mr.
close
Strong.
enough. It's because
He eats them all.
It's because you don't live close enough, so you don't get them. But yeah, it's a really common question though, because people love their pets, and there is something of the sort of creative genius of God in all the different animals. Some people have weird pets. I have a relative who has a praying mantis. Other people in the church have a tortoise. They were talking about the other day to me. So there's all kinds of a range of pets, not all which I like, but I think that's why the question comes up, because you kind of think they're such beautiful creatures and they have kind of such a relationship with me. Why wouldn't they be in heaven? So I understand the question, and Mark's going to begin to answer it for us.
Well, I think the reality is this isn't something the Bible directly addresses. So we're kind of working from what we do know to what we think from those kind of straight lines. Yeah. Hence the question. But I think that the easiest thing to say is I think there will be animals in heaven. I think the Bible makes that clear. So it's a renewed creation, and a renewed creation would suggest that this creation made better. So therefore, animals will be in heaven in all their varieties and all their species and all their glory. And I think that's part of the creativity of our God, that he has such diversity seen in that creation world, from the really ugly fish at the bottom of the deep sea to the most beautiful, stunning bird in the tallest tree. So I think all of those things are. So I think the first thing to say, yep, there will be animals. So then you go to what about pets? Will my dog Maxie be in heaven as Maxie? My hunch is no. Because I don't think they have souls, but I think there will be animals. But he might be.
Do you hope he is?
Well, is he sanctified by being in a Christian household?
Definitely not.
Probably not. But, he hasn't got a soul in that same way that we have. So will he be redeemed in the same way? Yeah. I think that's where it gets harder. So, it's easy to say yes to that, possibly.
Maybe a whole fresh batch of animals.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't have all the animals that have ever died in heaven, can you? In
I
that
hope
sense?
not. It'd be a bit busy.
So that'd be
some of the animals. Some of the animals clearly come from hell, anyway. Which
wasps, yeah. But what about to extend it? What about animals that have gone extinct? I mean, it's just speculation, isn't it? But it's an interesting question.
But I think. But possibly because you're seeing the diversity and the renewal of all that was good. So
maybe a dino.
Yeah. Or a dodo.
Or a mammoth.
I agree with all of that. And I think we should get sort of excited, but not too excited. Excited in the sense that the restored creation is going to be a really fantastic thing in the new heavens and new earth. And it is going to be physical and material. So once you've kind of finished with the fact that there's going to be loads of humans, a load of people there, you think, well, there's got to be some substance around it, and the God who created the kind of first earth and heavens and the earth will create something good and better in the new heavens and earth, and it's got to be populated with something. So I presume the same could be said for trees and everything else.
Absolutely.
And mountains and streams and stuff. But what's harder to conceptualize is because we can't. Really, you can only imagine sort of based around what you see and feel. So imagining something that's better than a tree, but is still the kind of experience of a tree, is hard, because you can't think, well, what's better than seeing a great, fantastic tree blowing in the wind? But maybe there is something better.
A tree that's got like Bluetooth, something like that.
What would a tree do with Bluetooth? How would it use it?
It's not my problem, but I'm just saying, if you want to improve a tree, add Bluetooth.
Yeah. Maybe a tree that you could hear, like the sort of tree spirits. I think that's why, Tolkien and other people are sort of in fantasy literature sort of get into tree spirits and everything else. And they're all kind of attempts to think, how could it be different and better? Some of them are weird because they put God's image in the whole of creation and God's spirit in the whole of creation in a sort of pantheistic way. But other times it is a kind of attempt to think what could be better, and it's hard to work it out. Sorry, Mark, I talked over you.
Well, I just contrary, Revelation in 2021, when it talks about to make things new, the word is much more renewed, and you get the sense of, although in Romans 8 this one is groaning to be made new in that sense. It's not that there will be. I don't think with the new heavens and new earth that there will be such. There's going to be a discontinuity, but there is also going to be continuity. So I think there will be recognisable features of this world still there that are perfected. So all that makes this world bad, evil, sin, suffering, death, is removed. But what is good about it is perfected. And I think that's part of the groaning of Romans 8, the struggle of to be made new, to be made redeemed in the way in which, in the sense that we are, at this present time, I am a sinner, but I'm not as bad as I could be because I've been redeemed, but I'm not quite yet what I'm going to be in glory. So I think I just wonder whether that same principle is at work within creation. Creation was good, it has fallen. It's not as bad as it could be, but it's not as good as it will be. In those ways.
Yeah.
We haven't got much longer on this question, but you can summarise.
I want to go on the veggie ones. So we think there will be animals there, as far as we can figure it out. Probably not the same animals that we've got here, both in sort of personality and in type, but a continuity of some sort. And I reckon, in as much as we can sort of understand the terms, there won't be meat, and they will be vegetarians, because there'll be a harmony that is the kind of restored original creation. Whereas, again, as far as we can figure out, there wasn't sort of meat-eating predators, including us. So I think as much as you can work it out, but that doesn't mean to say we should be vegetarians to get ready for it, because that's not our mandate. And I'm sure vegetarian food will taste a lot better in the new heavens and new earth.
Well, I think, we're not going to be disappointed, are we?
No.
And God, provides lavishly, generously. So you look at who he is, we're not going to be sitting there thinking, man, this isn't good.
Nut roast again.
Nut roast again. And maybe there is a kind of, I don't know, steak equivalent that is kind of doesn't involve death but tastes as good. Who knows?
Yeah.
Or a chicken tandoori curry. Who knows? But just a recommendation, Randy Alcorn's book, Heaven. It's probably a really helpful book just to think a little bit more. You might not agree with all that he says, but I think he's at least trying to think through from a biblical perspective what some of this thinking on heaven is. But at the end of the day, heaven is centered on Christ and delighting in him ultimately.
Good work. Okay, second question, guys. This one comes from Frankie. I've been having some discussions with a non-Christian family member who says that most faith comes from a place of fear. Do you think this is true? This came from me telling them about my testimony and how I was afraid of dying, and a youth leader said they weren't afraid of dying because they knew where they were going, which led me to listening and wanting to find that peace myself. Thoughts? Faith coming from a place of fear.
Yeah, I think people become Christians for all kinds of reasons. And somebody else asked me a similar question, or I think they posted it on social media, something I was doing. And they were making almost the same point, that basically not so much we brainwash children, but they were trying to accuse Christians of scaring children into becoming Christians. And I think it's fair to say that the fear of judgment is one of the components of becoming a Christian. And I think in different people's lives, it's a bigger or a smaller component. For some of us, it's the beauty of Jesus himself in his character, or it's the sort of compelling beauty of creation that makes us realize there's the designer and makes us want to know the designer. Something kind of scientific that leads us there. Sometimes it's specifically kind of understanding about the cross as the sort of first thing we ever understand, and seeing the kind of love of Jesus there. So I think there's kind of lots of ways in. I think fear is a component, but being afraid in the right way is a good thing when it comes to God. And what the gospel does is turn our sort of runaway fear to an honouring kind of fear. But yeah, that's my kick-off comments.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, turn it another way is if we believe that God created all, and things are fallen and broken, then we're going to expect in people that to feel that sense of brokenness. Yeah. So, I was reading yesterday, just something else, a non-Christian kind of psychotherapist, and he talks about the 4 givens that actually all humans have. One is the fear of death. One is just being alone. One is a sense of meaning. One is a sense of the ultimate freedom. Now, if a non-believer is recognizing that within the humanity, as he looks out and works with people, that there are those kind of 4 fundamental givens, we can look at that from a Christian perspective and say, well, of course, that's obvious, because You're made for a relationship with God. So without that, you are going to feel that sense of aloneness. You were created for life, and that was robbed. So you're going to fear death. So if a non-believer can fear that, I don't think it's a problem to say that actually Christianity is beginning to answer the big problems that the world and that every human being feels, experiences. There's no human being that does not fear death to some degree, or doesn't fear being alone, or doesn't fear living a life of utter meaningless. Now, if a non-Christian can do that, so in one sense, what that person is saying is, yeah, that's right, because what they're recognizing is the brokenness of this world, and therefore, but what they're not being able to do is connect up and kind of, faith is some kind of delusional answer to that problem, rather than seeing actually it's a sense of making them whole and as they should be. Does that make sense?
Yes, it really does. Because I think, it's like, fear is a recognition of the problem, isn't it? And if fear was your only motivator towards a series of beliefs, then you could say that's an inappropriate solo motivation. But it's never the solo motivation, is it? It's combined with being convinced intellectually, or being convinced by your experience of Jesus and all these other things that eventually, that kind of, I suppose, bring you across the line of becoming a Christian. It's not just fear, but that is part of your experience, isn't it? Yeah, I agree with that.
But I'm never going to turn to Jesus unless I see my brokenness or my need of Jesus. Yeah. So there is a sense, isn't there, that as I look upon the beauty of Jesus, and he says, "Come to me," he is kind of expressing something of rest, of comfort, of hope, of help, of salvation that resonates with something within me because of the way in which I have been made, that says, I like it, I love him, and I want to follow him. So as you say, that there is a fear, but the fear is being matched by beauty. You're holding those things in tension. It's not just a fear, it's the fact that in the fear that we all have, I'm seeing something of beauty and of love and warmth that kind of connects with that fear and resonates, and you kind of hold those things in tension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think Jesus himself talks to people in different ways. Sometimes he talks about judgment, and sometimes he talks about his forgiveness, or the life he offers of rest, or talks about coming under his lordship. So there's lots of different ways that Jesus teaches. So he doesn't just say, he's not kind of a hell preacher, always preaches about hell and says, just if you want to miss hell, come with me. And so I think, we should do all of those things. I think fear is not enough on its own. So if you're just frightened of God, you'll never really put your faith in him. You'll just be afraid of a sort of amorphous God, judgment, death, all sort of mixed together, and you'll just be petrified and kind of paralyzed. So
and if it is just it'd be legalism. You'll just end up doing stuff in order to kind of feel like you've kind of averted the wrath of God, which is why it's always those two things you're saying, isn't it? It's the fear and the beauty you hold in tension. If it's just the beauty, you may be attracted, but you're not seeing the depth of your need, and you won't see the beauty of Christ.
I think when I became a sort of half Christian, it was through fear when I was quite young, and I'm just trying to illustrate my point that it was only when I was a teenager that I kind of figured out that wasn't really enough, and I had to follow Jesus and think he was worth following and standing up for and all those things, rather than just I need a ticket out of hell quick.
And that is what people think, isn't it? And we would counsel people when they say that, actually, I don't want to, I want to believe in Jesus because when I die, I don't want to go to hell. Yeah. And we would say that that's not enough, because that will not sustain faith.
Yeah.
I hope you're enjoying this week's episode of Ordinary. Remember, you can subscribe to the podcast on YouTube or on whichever platform you're listening so that you never miss a new episode.
Can I just say, Josh, the funny here is that now that we're videoing, Graham, when he kind of pulls the eyebrows or the head to kind of signal that now is being seen. So now we can't just be going or signs, because now it's being seen. So we're going to have to work out a new signalling way now that it's being recorded.
Did you notice? Did you notice
I noticed the eyes.
My eyes got wider to say we need to move on now.
Move on.
We've been working together a little while. We're doing all right here.
But now we might just have a little bit more subtles, like just scratch or have a little drink, a little bit more natural.
The drink's good because it's a natural pause. Perfect. Yeah, love it. All right, we'll work on those. Next question comes from Isaac, and it is as follows. How do we differentiate Jesus' instructions for the 12 disciples from his instructions for us as followers of Christ? Matthew 10:19 says, "But when they arrest you, do not worry about what to say or how to say it. At that time you will be given what to say. For it will not be you speaking, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you." How can we be sure that this gifting is extended to ordinary believers? He's putting a bit of branding in there to the question. Love it. Ordinary believers. When so many of the instructions in these passages we take to be only for the disciples, like driving out demons and healing. Okay, go for it, Mark.
That's going to a signal. Yeah. Well, I think firstly context. So it is right to read it first through the lens of, is this applying to the disciples, and thinking, okay, this is primarily to them in their situation, in their context at that point. Which, remember, a lot is pre the death, pre-crucifixion in the Gospels particularly, and so therefore the Spirit hasn't come in the same way. So there are those things. Context is going to be important, but then as I read that and understand it in the context, are there themes that kind of track into the rest of the New Testament, in terms of persecution? Well, the epistles warn me of persecution, so it's not just true for the apostles, the disciples, for example. They talk about Spirit-filled, they talk about having the words, having the context. You see that worked out in different ways, but you don't see kind of demons in the later epistles as they're written to just ordinary believers in everyday church. So I think there are things where you're kind of just tracking the themes through the Bible and how that works out. Add to that, Graham.
Yeah.
Back to you.
I think it's a great question, because it applies to lots of things, not just the one that Isaac talked about, to do with the disciples. And I think that just that idea of taking out principles, it's not really that difficult, but particularly the one that Isaac mentions about being given words to say. I think there was something particular about the disciples that the Holy Spirit helped them to recall stuff about Jesus that they would then testify about. So there was something unique about that. But I think at the same time, there's something general we can take about that, which is I think Jesus promises, by the way he promises the Holy Spirit to disciples and those who follow the disciples, that there will be inspiration about what to say. It won't be the revelation in the sense of, I remember that Jesus said this, or I remember witnessing Jesus do this miracle. It won't be that kind of inspiration, but I think it's a reasonable promise to read across, because I think it's needed for the whole gospel age. I think when the disciples were equipped with miracle working power, there was something particular about the fact that they, not mimicked is not the word, they were modelled on Jesus's ministry. So they preached and they did miracles to show the kingdom was breaking in. And I'm not sure that's the commission that was given to them at the end of Matthew in the same way, to go out and do preaching and miracles as a kind of authentication in quite the same way. So then that's how you decide that I don't think I read that promise across in quite the same way. Is that making sense? It's making sense in my head, but
it's making sense. Yeah. You can definitely see, just playing devil's advocate, how that seems like an arbitrary selection process. Like, I'm going to choose to read this one for now and not those ones. Do you know what I mean? But I think you got to use the rest of the Bible or the progress and what's commanded at the end to figure that out. I don't think we're supposed to shake the dust off our feet if a town rejects us. And I don't think we sort of preach condemnation to the town of Burgess Hill. Always comes in for a little bit of stick on this podcast. But we don't sort of say, Burgess Hill, cursed be Burgess Hill, because I tried to tell someone about Jesus and they didn't listen. So I'm going to shake the dust off my feet and walk to Haywards Heath, and they'll never have an opportunity again. I think, though, there's a principle that reads across, that we're taking the gospel to the whole world now, not just to Jewish cities that might reject us. We're taking it to the whole world. But there's a principle that carries across, which is something like, there does come moments when people who reject the gospel are allowed to to stay in their rejection, and we have to move on sometimes. But we don't read that principle across in the same absolute way. Are you agreeing with me, Mark? I'm trying to read. No, I am trying to read your frown.
No, it was my thinking, friend. No, but I think I was just thinking of Josh's question, in terms of, it seems, we're just taking this out here in a pick and choose, but that works. I think that works the other way as well. Yeah. So often people do read the Bible in that way and quote verses out of context and justify as, well, the Bible says. But I think the right way of interpreting any manuscript is you read it in context. You read it in context of the immediate surrounding words and verses and paragraphs within it, then within the book that it's framed within, and then within the context for us within the whole of the 66 books of the Bible. And we know that the Bible ultimately is one story from Genesis to Revelation. So where does this particular bit sit in, and what has happened in the progress of that? So I think you're always interpreting in light of that, in light of the salvation story, the point it's at, and the significant markers that are then, okay, what's happening where, in the reality, isn't it, Christ has returned, ascended, we're now in that state of history. So you're going to be able to relate things a lot quicker directly in the kind of the epistles onwards, because they're written to kind of churches like us in that sense. Yeah. You're still going to have to do some of the context work because some of it doesn't quite carry over, but some of the principles will be quicker to see than, say, the Old Testament that's working under the Old Covenant order. You're having to understand it within that context, work it through what Jesus says, and then how does that apply to the church? Yeah. But that's just good Bible handling skills.
And this common sense stuff, isn't there? Like at the end of Matthew, Jesus says, go into all the world, make disciples and teach them. Some people I have heard said, well, that's just for the disciples, but it makes no sense. But that verse is a really helpful one to sort of control the rest, because that the primary thing is that we go make disciples, teach them, and that Jesus in particular, is with us by the Holy Spirit. That means then when we're back in Matthew 10, we think, oh, okay, what the disciples did in Jerusalem matches across, it reads across to what the church is supposed to do, making disciples and teaching them, and that process going on and on of making and teaching. And Jesus says he'll be with us. Well, what does that mean? It can't mean he's just sort of next to us observing. It must mean he's with us by his Spirit to inspire us, to give us boldness. So then that becomes a controlling text to read across the other text. I think we're just trying to illustrate sort of how we'd work it and reason it, if that helps.
It does help. Thank you. Do you think we have time for one more?
Guys, episode 1, season 4.
Yeah.
Let's push the boat.
Okay, let's do one more. I think we might have actually addressed part of this question in season 3, end of season 3. I can't remember, but there's a section of this question towards the end that I think is quite relevant. So I'm just going to go for the last section of this question. It's from Sam. And it's about our priorities as restrictions ease, okay? I'm talking about COVID restrictions. How do we balance loving others and respecting their concerns whilst also loving others in recognising the importance of some of the things we've not been able to do for our own good, e.g. Singing together as the body of Christ? So that's a question to do with how you balance as church leaders and in churches moving forward with getting back to normal, with recognising some people are going to be uncomfortable with that or have different opinions about what is safe, what is acceptable, what is appropriate, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's another really good question. And we've obviously had to wrestle this as church leaders, as lots of church leaders have across the country. I think it's not simple to say, well, love is just we love the maximum number of people. So what most people need to do, we'll do.
Yeah.
Because you could say that. You could say, well, I've got a church and I need to love everybody, but I can't love everybody, so I'll just love the majority. So let's just vote on it and then we'll...
Just do a survey,
we'll love the most people and then we'll not love the rest. I think you just can't distill love down to, I do this or I don't do this. You've got to kind of weigh up all the parameters of, yes, what does the whole church think and feel? What are the kind of theological principles, what are to do with COVID, what are the practical risks and all those things, and make the best judgment we can make, which we think serves the church as a whole best. And then the love is in how we communicate that and how we try and mitigate that for those who feel that wasn't the right decision. Mm-hmm. But I don't think love means that we're kind of held hostage to a few people, but it does mean we need to love however many it is, few or many, who may have different views to us, and communicate that love and try and accommodate and try and mitigate. But it can't mean that we stop loving some people in order to love other people. That it just can't be reduced to sort of simple equations like that.
No, but I think love is broader as well, isn't it? So actually loving, I'm being loving as I'm being patient with those who have, there's a love that works itself out in patience and forbears. So those who disagree, instead of just kind of writing them off or, thinking badly of them or thinking, imposing wrong motives onto them, they've got weak faith, they're foolish, they're whatever. Yeah. Actually, you're loving them well by just recognising actually there is difference, particularly on this issue at the moment. And actually, how do we're just patient, but do all we can to help them stay connected with the life of the church, help them to, so, for us it's meant we're going to ensure that we have continued really good live stream of the services so that those who cannot come still feel as engaged as they can be, trying to, where we can, move outside, make sure that we are doing things. So we're doing all we can, but you can't be, in this kind of instance, we recognise as leaders, there's those who are kind of wishing us to go much faster. There are those who kind of disagree with us opening up and think, it's not right or healthy. And then there's those, who generally are kind of quite happy. But you're never going to satisfy everyone on those.
Yeah. Such is the burden of the leadership of the church, eh?
But then you're also working with the biblical principles of, the Bible speaks of not giving up meeting together. Yeah. So the Bible puts a massive emphasis, a really important emphasis on meeting, in the sense of it is an either or. There is a sense of the Bible says you should be doing that. You can't not do that as a believer. So there's a priority there. Singing together is a priority, commanded. Praying together. So there are things that are commanded that are saying we must do that as the Bible, and yet we recognise in this past year that those things have been restrained. So we've had to be a bit creative in how we do that in this past year, because we recognise the importance and the priority of them. But now we're kind of saying, okay, there's still the priority, and gathering is better than not gathering. Physically gathering is better than not physically gathering. So how can we do that safely together as much as we can?
Lovely. Perfect. Thanks, guys. I think we'll call it a day there for the questions, because we're hitting about 30 minutes now. We'd love to have more questions, just because we won't do episodes on questions, or maybe we will if we get loads of them, but we can thread questions in at the beginning of other topics as well. So please do send us questions. We are happy to answer those. ordinary@sxxnt.org.uk is the email address. You want to say something?
I've got a question, Josh. I've just got a question. So we don't have Sunday Roundup anymore.
Well, yeah.
We don't have News Break anymore. We don't have...
I mean, this is the thing. Our production team have taken a look at Ordinary and diced it up and thrown quite a few bits away. So
it's going to be amazing. Okay. It's going to be amazing. So we want loads of feedback.
I just thought I'd ask the question. So for people thinking maybe they enjoyed Sunday Roundup and the jingles, they're not going to be present in season 4, but look out for other things instead.
That's right. And listen, we might not have such strict sections, but we'll still be talking about things. Like if something massive in the news happens, we're going to be talking about it on Ordinary, just because we haven't got the news jingle. So, we'll still be doing that sort of thing, trying to engage with culture, trying to engage with media and art and things like that as well. But we might just have a few less jingles, that's all. It's going to be great. It's going to be wonderful. I mean, just listen to this.
I'm excited.
Listen to this lo-fi music that's beginning to fade in now as we get towards the pinnacle, the final moments of the podcast. So we hope you've enjoyed it. Come back next week. We've got guests, as Graham talked about in the beginning of the podcast. We'll talk about relationships, pre-Christian relationships and pre-marriage relationships, and how that's affected people. And so, same time next week. Come back.
Hi, thanks for listening to this episode of Ordinary. If you've enjoyed it, and we hope you have, please hit the subscribe button on YouTube right now. Thanks for listening.